This week on the WriterCon podcast,
I think is always to write your heart, write from your heart, write what you really believe. If you start trying to write what you think somebody's going to like or the way you think you should write, it's going to come off that way. You got to be honest. Just be honest and write from your heart.
welcome to WriterCon, a gathering place for writers to share their knowledge about writing and the writing world. Your hosts are William Bernhardt, best-selling novelist and author of the Red Sneaker books on writing, and Rene Gutteridge, best-selling author of over 30 novels and screenplays.
Hey there, writers. Exciting times here in the WriterCon world. We're only a few days away from the start of the summer writing retreat in Branson, and of course only about 6 weeks away from WriterCon itself, our annual conference when over 200 people from the writing world descend on Oklahoma City to share what they know and boost one another's careers. Rene, you usually handle the pitch sessions and the private consultations. Sometimes I think people who would benefit from this shy away because it sounds scary or intimidating. I don't know. How would you describe the typical WriterCon pitch experience?
Well, I mean, I'll be honest. It's always terrifying to sit in front of somebody and pitch your story. I'm just going to be honest. But I will tell you that once people get in there and they do it, that breaks the ice for people typically, and they're able to keep doing it. So you got to have the courage to step in there that one time. I one time drug a guy by his elbow he was standing in the corner and he couldn't. And I said, "Sir, don't miss this opportunity. Look at all these folks just sitting here." And he came out and he was like, "I'm so glad I did it. It went well, you know." So it's more of the intimidation factor of getting in there and doing it. But you'll never be sorry that you did it. It's a good practice, and you're going to meet some great people.
Okay, Jesse, I'm always trying to think of some way to surprise you.
All right, hit me.
So you're going to record a special live edition of the podcast at WriterCon. But, you know, all three of our headliners have already or are about to appear on the podcast. So how shall we pick the interview guest for the live WriterCon edition?
I almost think like somehow we should like save it for the ReaderCon and just like pull some people who show up for that onto the podcast.
Are you a pantser or a planner?
Yeah. Like, I don't even know what that means. It'd be great.
Or no, a golden ticket. Like Willy Wonka.
Yes, let's do that.
I'll see if we can have that put in the swag bag.
I love it.
All right. Our interview today is with James Richard, meaning Rick, on his book covers, Ludwig, who spent 40 years in the academic, healthcare, pharmaceutical disciplines before becoming a published fiction writer. He has since published several books, and his most recent just came out this week. It's called Voice of the Victim, the second novel in his Maui Mysteries series, coming after the first book, Eyes of the Beholder. We'll talk to Rick right after the news segment and a brief word from our friends at Draft to Digital.
Hi, this is Kevin Tomlinson with Draft to Digital. Ebooks are amazing, but there's just something about having your book in print. That's why we built D2D Print. We take care of you with free layout templates and formatting, and we can convert your ebook cover into a full wraparound print cover automatically. Come check out D2D Print and all the cool tools we've built for you. Find out more at drafttodigital.com.
Okay, first news story of the day. The USA Today bestseller list is back, baby. For some of you who have been listening to this for a while, you will remember in December of last year when USA Today announced that its bestseller list was going to be discontinued, was the word they used. I mean, this was a fixture in the book industry for at least 30 years and was generally considered to be the most scientifically accurate of the various bestseller lists. Well, they're bringing it back, but with a twist. It has a marketing partnership with the independent bookstore community. And the most prominent buy links will go to Bookshop, which, as we've mentioned before, is an online retailer that benefits indie bookstores. Also, they've announced that the USA Today list is now combined in a more, guess what the word's going to be? A more automated manner. Prior to the list relaunch, an editor manually compiled the list, but there have been layoffs, and USA Today has made the process of data collection, I'm going to assume, more automated. So less work is needed by the editors to produce each week's list of 150 best-selling titles, because it's the only bestseller list that combines sales of all formats. They don't care whether it's print or ebook. They don't care if it was, romance or somebody considers it literary or whatever it is. It's just, or a hardcover, paper. Here are the 150 best-selling titles, period, which is why, as I said, it's sometimes considered the most scientific. It is purely sales-driven. It doesn't prioritize one thing over another. Okay, Rene, what do you think about this? And in particular, the idea that they're getting more input from indie bookstores.
I think it's great, right? Like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How dare you?
Not a controversial.
I don't know if this is controversial or not. I don't know if I'm saying something controversial, but I do support indie bookstores. So right?
Rene, why don't you support indie bookstores
tell
more?
Me what to say? I don't know. Seems
at,
good. Seems good on the surface. Although somebody's gonna figure out how to, jack up the system. But anyway, for now,
probably.
It seems pure.
Preferably with one of my books.
Yeah. Listen, viewers, listeners, let's get Bill's book on the top of the USA Today. However you need to do it. Figure it out.
There's a campaign. Yeah. Actually, one of our top speakers at WriterCon, who's already been on the podcast, Susan Meisner, a friend of yours, is a major, she's probably on all the bestseller lists, but I know she's done extremely well on the USA Today list. And I think it's, for the reason I just said, it is the most sales-driven or accurate count. I do remember, Jesse, though, that you did not have much sympathy a few weeks ago for James Patterson when he was complaining that his most recent book hadn't made the New York Times list. And the New York explained that's because their list is, quote, curated, meaning apparently we don't want riffraff like you on our list. The USA Today list is not curated, though, so that probably means James Patterson will be on it a lot. Are you happy about this development?
I'm happy for the, conglomeration of ghostwriters that he has hired to write all of his books. I'm happy for them. So, for the James Patterson book farm that he runs, I'm glad they will all continue to have jobs.
Oh, that's very generous. Okay, news story number 2.
Coming for you, James.
Of AI, you were afraid it was just going to be college students using AI to write their papers. No, publishers are now using it. The people you would think would be most opposed to the very idea, but publishing houses are now using generative AI, and of course, literary agents are scrambling to stop it. Penguin Random House, the largest publisher in the English-speaking world, is now using generative AI, they admitted at a recent conference, to support marketing efforts. And particularly, someone mentioned to generate book summaries. Critics, of course, say there's risk involved because the AI tools will potentially generate misinformation. Random House replied that they'll always have a human around somewhere who knows the book.
Did they say it that way? Because that concerns me.
Someone who can review the AI-generated material, but they say even with that, it's still a time saver. Agents, of course, are trying to ensure author contracts encompass all these potential eventualities of AI technology, which I think is going to be pretty difficult. Rene, this reminds me a lot of how the world changed overnight about 2009, I think, when ebooks started to sell well. They'd existed before. There was a clause in my contracts, but it was trivial. Nobody paid any attention to it because nobody bought ebooks until suddenly they did. And contracts either didn't cover them or didn't cover them well because their agents hadn't paid much attention to those clauses until it was too late. Do you think this will be any different?
I remember that very well. And I remember thinking ebooks would never take off. Thankfully, my agent was on top of it at the time. I think this is going to be a real mess. I got to tell you, I think it's going to be a real mess. And I think the potential for problems will almost be endless in how AI is going to affect writing, publishing, editing. My goodness, it's. I hope we get this under control. I am not a conspiracy theorist panicker typically, but I have to tell you, I think it's going to be a real mess. It already is. The writer's strike. I mean, the whole writing industry has come to a halt. So things like this. The actors will be next, and so it's. I never in my life would have imagined we'd be dealing with this stuff. So anyway.
I mean, hats off to agents who are trying to protect their clients. But at this point, I think we've barely scraped the surface on what AI can, and how can you put in a contract clause to prevent something nobody's even thought of yet?
Right. Absolutely.
And there's very few ways to verify whether something's been done with AI or not. So
there's going to have to be a technology that figures that out. I mean, that somebody's got to step in. I don't know who, but somebody's got to step in and stop all this for right now, because we don't have it figured out. We've released a weapon and we're like, well, I guess we'll see what it does. And
ironically, how many movies told us this was going to happen?
So
and we didn't listen.
Jesse, they also told us the pandemic was coming. Why don't we listen to the
Well, they also told me I'd be driving a flying car.
That's true. It's hard to separate the lies from the truths.
The transporter, I want that even more than the flying car.
If we had the replicator, we would have so many less problems.
Hey, Jesse, you've said before that you're not really planning to write a book, but you think you could with the help of generative AI?
So I should tell you, as a podcast producer, I have there's 10 of them now, but there are like multiple services out there that will use AI to help you, not with the editing, but like with all of the marketing materials and the show notes and the titles and whatnot. And there is a service I use that actually does an incredible job of coming up with great titles and great show notes. Big problem is it does horrible with names, right? And it does terrible with references to other, say, artists or whatever. And so even with this great tool that saves me a whole bunch of time, I still have to read and review it and make sure it's not throwing in weird words or weird names or spelling someone's name wrong.
Well, that's probably what that editor at USA Today does, don't you think? Proofread the list before it goes out.
So AI is a tool just like so many other tools, and it's about how much you should use it versus, whether it should be allowed to be used or not.
Right.
So,
all right, Jesse, cue up the music. Let's talk to Rick Ludwig. Rick Ludwig, welcome back to the podcast.
Well, it's a pleasure. I enjoyed it last time, and I know I'll enjoy it this time.
Well, you know what the first question is going to be. If you could offer writers one piece of advice, what would it be?
Yeah, not go into another line of work. That you can't do that. No, my real advice, I think, is always to write your heart, write from your heart, write what you really believe. If you start trying to write what you think somebody's going to like or the way you think you should write, it's going to come off that way. You got to be honest. Just be honest and write from your heart.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Congratulations are in order. You've just had a new book released, Voice of the Victim. Tell us about that.
Well, Voice of the Victim is the second, chronologically, the second book in the Maui Mysteries series. And I wrote these books initially when I lived on Maui for about 10 years. I lived on Maui, and it's the absolute perfect place to write a book. You know that because you've been there many times, I know. But I started writing, and I was smart enough to go take a class from a guy named Bernhardt, and learned how to actually make people understand what I was writing. And the first book is called Eyes of the Beholder, and it is what introduces the characters. introduces Keone Boyd, who is a sergeant of detectives with the Maui Police Department, and is a very high percentage Hawaiian. No, I've only met 2 people who were 100% Hawaiian in all my time on Maui, but he's pretty high up there in the 90s percent Hawaiian. And he is a wonderful detective, very big guy. He's 6 foot. What is he? 6'3", 6'7", I think, and 175 pounds. And he's a big guy. And I always see, I actually always see Dwayne Johnson when I'm picturing Keone, but even though he's Samoan and Keone is Hawaiian, they do have a lot in common in the way they look. But in the first book, Keone meets the woman who ends up becoming his wife. A lot of things happen, but the main driver of the story is a fellow by the name of Sam Loftus, who has a problem. Okay, everything is backwards for him. Right is left, left is right. He thinks his sister-in-law is his wife's his sister-in-law, and it causes him difficulties. And the first difficulty it causes, he drives on the wrong side of the road and crashes into Keone's new sports car. So that sets up the characters, okay? In this book now, Keone and Julie are married, and they're going off on their honeymoon, which is going to be a cruise of the Greek islands. Not bad. I think they have a good choice in that. And the detective bureau is down a couple of detectives based on the last story. Right?
Everyone's going to have something to do here, right?
Yeah.
Well, what may be astonishing, Rene, did you know this? This guy spent most of his, adult life in the healthcare sector, right? And pharmaceuticals, and you wrote technical articles, but not fiction, right?
Yeah, I never wrote fiction. I wrote, wrote chapters.
You confess now if those academic articles were really.
Yeah, they were pretty dry. The hardest thing I had to learn, and this, was from in one of your classes when Greg Field, right?
Mm-hmm.
He read one of the first things I ever wrote, and he said to me, Rick, in fiction, sometimes we use contractions. We don't use contractions in scientific writing; it's not allowed. So that helped me a great deal. That was a good bit of advice. But I love the stories. I think they are real mysteries, and I think they are solvable mysteries, which I always get annoyed when I can't. I love mysteries; read them all my life, but I get really pissed off if they leave a key bit of evidence, a key clue, and don't tell me, as the wonderful Agatha Christie used to do all the time. But
okay, so I always try and zero in on what's most unique or what I haven't seen before in how many of these, like 130 episodes of this podcast. But anyway, I can come up with 2. You and your wife, Christy, have been married, is it 42 years?
It'll be 43 years when at the conference. We're going to be celebrating our anniversary there.
And you still play golf once a week?
At least once a week, twice when we can. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Together. We only play golf with each other.
And my second unique factoid is your daughter also writes fiction. And guess what? She's also been on this podcast
yes, she has.
Back.
Yes, she has.
How did she get started writing?
Well, she's written from the day I guess the first time she was able to pick up a pencil. She's always been writing. She started out, the first stories that she wrote were very horror oriented. And then she got more into fantasy, and that's what she's been publishing, are the fantasy stories. Mm-hmm. And I try to learn from her all the time, because she gets to your heart very, very well, and she describes things enormously well. Now, that doesn't mean I'm terrible. I'm just saying she's very good.
That's awesome.
Yeah, she's wonderful. And she's published 2 books so far, and she's working on the third one. The first one is called, I'm looking over it, Bloodfall Arena. And the second one is called Blood Embers. See, I get a little help here. And the third one is now
cue cards right now.
Yes,
Rick.
Actually, she's going out to get her book to make sure she told me the right title.
That's why he remembered all those details about his plot. He's got car. I couldn't talk much about the book I'm writing right now.
I have no cue card. She's honestly doing Sudoku while she's watching me. So that's not helping me at all. She just yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Rick. I didn't mean to cut you off. I wanted to ask you a question. So you've covered a little bit at the beginning what you thought was your worst writing advice that you've been given. And as you know, most of our listeners are writers. So share with us the best piece of writing advice that you've been given.
The best piece of advice. And it's going to sound very familiar to Bill, but it's never give up. And I think with these stories, it's especially true because the first two books I wrote and self-published under different titles, and they were quite different stories, actually, although they had common features. And I got the opportunity when Babylon Books agreed to publish my third book, and they did. I was very, very happy about that, which was called Pele's Fire. I talked to Bill about it, and I said, it'd be nice if you had all three books were in Babylon because they'd be consistent and all that. And he said, well, why don't you rewrite them? But you have to have a new title, a new editor, everything has to be new. And I thought I was quite frightened by that. But it was the best thing that I've ever done was the chance to go back and take a story you thought was done and completely rewrite it and rate it now, knowing what the other two books are going to do, knowing what the full series is. Going back and writing the first book with that in mind was amazing. It was like a Stephen Covey thing, begin with the end in mind kind of thing. And I wrote a very different book. And the second book was extremely different because in the second book before, it was just the one story. It wasn't the cruise. Keone took off, went on the cruise, and then we didn't hear from him again until near the end of the book. And we didn't know what he was doing. And the third book was all about what happened on the cruise. And I had to write all his flashbacks, which I know is one of your favorite things, Bill, in the world, is to have 100 flashbacks. Yes. So when I got to rewrite it, I said, okay, they happen at the same time. Why don't I write them at the same time? And it was the best and worst decision I've ever made in my life, because when you're trying to keep two time zones together, you end up with something like this that has the time and date in each place, but I'm doing the story in chronological order. So it's it's one time it's 5:30 a.m. For them, and it's 2:30 a.m. in Maui, and so we're going back and forth with that. But I believe it's all right. I think that last proof thing I sent to you, I found one date and time that was wrong still, but I had to do spreadsheets and the whole business on that to make it all work out. But, I am a scientist, so I should know how to do that. But it has been about a lot of years, but it did work out. And I really like the books much, much better now that those two stories are going on in parallel, because unknown to me, there are some scenes in each separate story that relate to each other. And I had no idea they did until I put them together in the same book. So that, to me, that was a great experience, if enormously frightening. It worked out very well. And now the third book has space for other stuff. So I was able to put in a whole other storyline in the third book because I didn't have to go back and do all those flashbacks to the cruise ship, So I think it was great. So I am very grateful and will continue to be. And I did change the name of the third book from Fires of Pele from Pele's Fires to Fires of Pele. So it does have a new title now.
Completely different. Yeah.
Yeah, completely. I don't think anybody will pick up on that at all. It'd be good. Yeah.
So Rick, I'm just guessing here, but we always talk about pants or a planner.
Yeah.
You're a planner.
Well, I knew you were going to ask that because, and I would say I start out as a planter. Because I always write my first and last chapter first. I write the beginning and the end of the story first. That's the Stephen Covey thing again, begin with the end in mind. And they always change over the course of writing the story. And then because of Bill's advice, I write the first draft without stopping. I write straight through from that first chapter to the last chapter, doing no editing. And I don't have an idea where I'm going, honestly. Mm-hmm. So I have an idea because I know where it ends, and I kind of put myself in the middle as I'm writing. I think I'm a little pantser, little planner. But when I'm editing, I'm absolutely a planner. And I go through, this tome here is the contiguous timeline for the Maui Mysteries, right? Wow. Starting back in 1900, which of course the stories start in 2013. So, but yeah,
hold that up to the screen again. This is.
Yeah, there it is.
My goodness.
That's wow. That's
and it is
almost personality disorder. That's
well, in my first book, the guy was OCD, and I was kind of feeding off myself because I'm pretty OCD, but not clinically OCD, but I'm close. And I do have to do that, and that's why I edit for other folks. I try to help them out. I'm a beta reader that goes crazy. I find every typo and everything, and I love doing that because I just feel like if there's anything I can do to make someone's story come across easier or be clearer, I'm doing them a favor, and most of them take it that way. I have to say, they're very good about it, and they put up with my tediousness. But it's
not at all. I think you already touched on this, but what's next? What are you working on?
Well, book 3 is done. Rewrite of book 3 is done, and I've sent it off to my beta readers. 6 of them that I'm using. I have 10 of them, but I use 6 for every book, and I use 6 because I expect 5 of them to actually do it. So I like to have 5 different points of view, but they're all writers, they're all authors. And then in addition to that, at a certain point, I will send one to a voracious reader that I respect, who isn't a writer, and get a different perspective than from the writers. I have 2 alpha readers, by the way, that I get to see it before anybody. One of them is sitting over there, and that's Jenny. And the other one is my wife, Christy. And Jenny is a writer and Christy is a reader. She's coming to ReaderCon.
That works well.
By the way, she's looking very forward to ReaderCon because one of her favorite authors is Lisa Gardner. By the way, so no wonder I was interested in your. They know it's very good. I like your.
And now you can tell her you've been on the same podcast as Lisa Gardner too.
Is that exciting? It really is. And she loves her writing, and but she is someone who reads a lot of books. She reads more books in the course of a year than I do. And she very quickly will decide if she's not going to finish it. Whereas I always give myself 100 pages, thing. But she'll get 5 pages in and say, terrible.
Really?
I'm not going to read it.
I'm in her camp. Rick, I got to wrap this up, but thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure. It's great to see you again, Rene. And I will see you too at the WriterCon too. I hope.
You soon at WriterCon.
Okay, we'll see you then. Take care.
Just a few parting words. Rene, you've got an announcement, I think.
Yeah, we want to let people know about a free webinar that we're offering on. So if you're new to conferences or you just need a refresher on how to best prep for a conference, we've got you covered, and it's free. So if you'll go to writingmomentum.com, you'll see a link. It'll give you all the instructions you need. It's pre-recorded, so you can watch it at any time. You'll also get a PDF that you can download with extra information. So check it out.
All right, fantastic. And I, of course, am predictably going to mention WriterCon, our annual writers conference. You heard Rick Ludwig talk about how important getting feedback from writers has been to his writing career. He also talked about why he comes back to WriterCon every year. And he's totally right. That's why we have the retreats. That's why we have the cruises. But I wanted to point out that even at this big annual conference, we still have lots of private or small group or one-on-one opportunities, like the pitch sessions Rene talked about earlier. And they also offer private consultations with the faculty member of your choice and manuscript reviews. You can schedule one-on-one time with a lot of different knowledgeable people. You can even have lunch with our guests of honor, Tosca Lee and Lisa Gardner. That plus, 60 speakers doing 3 days of classes, and some of the best people in the world should give you more than enough reason to consider joining us at WriterCon this year, September 1 through 4 in Oklahoma City. For more information, please visit our website, which is writercon.com. Until next time, hey, you writers, keep writing. And remember, you cannot fail if you refuse to quit. See you next time.